A happy Friday to you all. A flurry of news on this Friday has come as it goes with the Cincinnati Bengals and all of the happenings as we head into week 2 of the preseason. Man, oh man, it's been a roller coaster of a ride. Perhaps not as big of a roller coaster of a ride as maybe some folks a few states over from Ohio, that being Minnesota, have endured this week. But we're going to talk about it all. We're going to talk about the preseason game with the Bengals going to the Bears in their week 2 clash. And then, of course, we will talk about all of the big news that has come up not only on Friday, but the unfortunate injury stuff that tends to pop up this time of year. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He's John Sheeran. John, we've got ourselves quite the amount of topics today to talk about.
You know, I never considered Minnesota being a few states over from Ohio, but I guess you being a West Coast guy, you all think the Midwest is just one big conglomerate area of just, yeah, you know, we're just out on the East Coast, you guys. So, but yeah, shout out to poor Vikings fans. But yeah, it's been Thursday provided more bad news than good. Friday, I think, has provided more good news than bad, which is just a reflection of life. You know, it comes and goes in waves. Never get too high, never get too low.
Never get too high, never get too low. That is good advice. Sage advice, my friend. But we're gonna talk about all of that stuff. I think we're gonna kind of start with the happy stuff and then backtrack a little bit into some of the stuff that's a little concerning because that feeds into the preseason game on Saturday. As I mentioned, I'm Anthony. He is John. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast network. And podcast channel, rather, on the Believe Network. Our show, Matt and Willie No Ball from Coach Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, and Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends, all part of the slate. And we are cruising with you, giving you all kinds of content, hopefully filling up your week at this point with all kinds of different content, especially now that games are being played, etc. So you got to go back and find the Believe in Cincy channel, not the Cincy Jungle channel anymore. It's the Believe in Cincy channel. You got to go there, resubscribe to the feed, leave us a rating if you could. That helps us out with a lot of different things. Appreciate that. And if you like the video side of things, you can, of course, find us streaming this video as we go live on a number of different platforms, be it the Cincy Jungle Facebook page, the Cincy Jungle Twitter account, a couple of other Twitter accounts, the show Twitter account, etc., and of course our YouTube channel. You could subscribe to our YouTube channel underneath John there on that bottom right-hand side, bottom right corner. There is a show, Orange and Black Insider show icon. Click that. It'll bring up the option to subscribe, to do the thumbs up, to click the bell, do all the things. Just asking so much of you all to do all this work for us, but we appreciate it. Hopefully you're enjoying all the stuff that we are bringing you here. There's a reason I'm wearing this bright colored hat in particular today, John. I wasn't wearing a hat earlier, but I'm like, hey, we're going to come talk about this because this just got kicked out, as we go live here, hour and a half ago, right? The Bengals unveil their all orange unis. We heard about the pants that were leaked through Madden and all kinds of different stuff. Looked pretty cool. We hadn't seen the true mock, we've seen some really good mock-ups from graphic designers, et cetera, to tease kind of what the look looks like, and the Bengals did some work for us. I'm hoping as I, share this. This is from the official Bengals Twitter account, so I want to make sure that we give them credit. The official Bengals Twitter account here, and the video. This is not a drill. hashtag open in orange. I'm hoping that the sound comes through sometimes with headphones, different mics and all that kind of stuff. When you play this, sometimes it doesn't come through. If not, we'll talk through it. But this is a cool video they put out, just about an hour ago as we go live with the look of the new uniforms.
We're keeping our eye on the storm that's developing here in Hamilton County, which seems to be leaving an orange glow throughout the city. The energy from these cells seems to be gravitating towards Paycor Stadium, where the eye of the storm is now developing. This storm front, as you can see now, is spreading throughout downtown Cincinnati, and it appears to be taking over the city. Due to an increased energy in the area, Paycor is the best place to be during this time. The storm is building, and the jungle is ready.
Open in orange. The sound came through for you, I assume, John, because you weren't saying anything, right? So hopefully all of our listeners got the sound on that there. Pretty cool. By the way, this is totally going to make me sound like a total geek, but there's some cool videos and stuff that people put together on creative YouTube channels, far more creative than I am, where they use that old analog look with the TV, the TV crackles and all that kind of, it's almost like an old VCR look. I love that the Bengals did that at the end with like the emergency broadcast system type of thing. I thought that was a really cool effect they threw in there. Kudos to the Bengals media team putting together that thing. And dude, these things still, they look pretty awesome. I think in the mind's eye, you go, is this going to work? They look pretty damn cool.
That was kind of my thinking. I was hesitant, I think, initially with the orange pants, not for the whole Cleveland Browns copycat thing. We can talk about that later. I feel like very few teams do orange pants like well. I think the Browns do it pretty well. I think Oklahoma State does it well. I'm more of like consistency freak when it comes to aesthetics, but I think the coloring matches. I think the stripes match better than what I thought in my mind. So I'm all for it. And I really liked their announcement with Stripe the Jungle going orange, black, orange as like a true striping pattern throughout the uniform. And I was hesitant about the all orange ones, but yeah, they look good. Like it's the same thing with like any type of new uniform combination where it's just kind of all in your mind and you're thinking about it, and then you see what it is in practice, and it's like, yeah, it looks pretty good. I honestly think like I wouldn't be upset if they wore orange pants like for most of the season. I feel like they look that much better than like at least the white and orange pants that they have. So I'm sold on this for sure.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty clean. Here you go again, a closer look at the picture there. Really cool graphic with the orange lightning there, and kudos to the Bengals media team, the PR team, and everything. They're hyping this up. This is what they're going to be wearing in the opener. They've gotten so creative and just really done such great work this last half decade plus of really ingratiating themselves to the fans and bringing them in, hyping up the excitement, and really just this new era of football. And this uniform does kind of exemplify that to me a little bit. I think it just kind of plays into new era of Bengals. They changed the uniforms a handful of years ago, and now this is added to it. The old school guy in me a little bit wants to see the old Ken Anderson Pumpkinhead, the real old school uniforms, just as a one throwback for one game a year. But regardless, I think this is cool. I think the the white tiger and the white helmet aesthetic that they really put together fully last year looks really, really clean. So they've got, as if we didn't think so before, they've got some of the best looking uniforms, if not the best group of uniforms in this new look. Really adds to it.
I would say this probably completes the set. You're probably looking at maybe a black helmet because the NFL does allow now 2 alternative helmets, so maybe you can get that in there sometime in the near future. I will say you cannot lose in all orange uniforms because then the traffic cone memes are just gonna just compound you online, and that you don't want to avoid that as much as possible. I guess they've only lost once in recent memory wearing orange, and that was last year when Jake Browning was quarterback against the Steelers. That wasn't obviously planned being that quarterback, but yeah, typically pretty successful. It is funny though, Anthony, considering going back to last year when the Browns announced their white helmets to go like an all white uniform. Bengals fans hounded their mentions about, oh, like who's copying who now? And then the Bengals announced orange pants. And of course, the Browns troll the Bengals on Twitter. It is hilarious to me seeing both these fan bases go back and forth, considering the origins of all of this is just Paul Brown being petty, which is why the aesthetic of the Bengals matches in some ways the aesthetic of the Browns. Who copied who? I feel like we kind of know the answer to that, but yeah, naturally, these two teams are going to have similarities, even with the new uniforms and new designs that they show out. So seeing the back and forth is always funny to me, considering that the lack of awareness is stunning.
That's a great point. And all of this stuff and these talking points you just brought up remind me so much of the history within this division, within those two teams you mentioned, the Bengals and the Browns respectively. The animosity of the Brown family still holds animosity towards the Browns. Yeah. That's every year. But the animosity between Paul Brown and Art Modell that existed for decades, and still lives on beyond both of them, right? So there was that, and then you usher in the element of the 80s when Weish and Jerry Glanville and all these guys and Chuck Nolan, all these guys just butted heads and just did not like each other. Truly did not like each other. And now we're going into this where it's like, man, it's it's more division talk, smack talk type of thing. So I think they look great. I think they did an outstanding job with these. I think it's a very, very cool aesthetic that they've come up with here. And they've rounded out their uniform rotation, as you mentioned, very, very well. So wanted to kick off the show with that because that came across the wire shortly before we took the air. And as we said, we're continuing on with good news. And all of the good news likely pales in comparison to Mr. Andrew Seiler, who has been a long time listener of our show. And we are very, very grateful for not only his continued listenership, but man, stoked for you. In case you're not watching the video here, he has a comment here. Hey guys, I'm watching this stream while holding my new baby daughter born on Monday. Can't wait for the season to start. Congratulations to you. Congratulations to the mother. And I hope all is well with baby and mom. Hopefully you got some sleep leading up to the birth, man, because it's going away if it hasn't already. So congratulations to you both. Give us a name. Tell us what the name is. We want to know. But congratulations to you both. That is awesome, and thank you for all the support you've shown the show over years, really, quite honestly. Moving on, though, we've got more good news, buddy. Evan McPherson gets paid 3-year extension. Now, this was kind of, everybody's talking, John, about when's Chase's extension going to come? When are all these? I mean, we look at the last few years now. Yeah, Chase is still lingering out there, but the Bengals have now extended their quarterback. They've extended their 2 star linebackers in Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt. You've got the Chase and Higgins situations. You lost Bates, that sort of thing. But they've kept a number of these core guys being re-signed now, McPherson being one of them. When you look at the whole picture of McPherson, you look at the accuracy percentages, it's not, the best, but I mean, the dude is clutch. The dude is asked to hit field goals that few other kickers are asked to hit in terms of distance and in inclement weather. So I think he is one of the best kickers in the league and is being paid like it with this new contract extension. And this was announced, not the Gold Peak iced tea ad that popped up on the Cincy Jungle. This was announced on Friday.
I mean, as soon as McPherson's rookie season ended, I think the Bengals would have wanted to extend him then. Never before. Nonetheless, a rookie kicker has gone 14 for 14 in the postseason. And by the way, he's 19 for 19 all time in the postseason, even though it's just been 2 postseason trips or whatever. But the Bengals have leaned on him in the most. I know, like the fact that he's gotten that many opportunities is kind of an indictment on the offense a little bit, but it shows how much that they've leaned on him in the most important games in recent memory at just 22, 23 years old. And he has yet to flinch there. Now, yes, I think he ran into a minor slump in 2022, and I think he showed a lot of bounce back and a return to consistency in 2023. I think he was perfect within 50 yards last season, and that was notable considering in 2022 in his second year, he was kind of missing some kicks that didn't seem like he should be missing, considering he can be accurate from 60 plus yards or whatever. So in terms of just natural all around talent at 25 years old, he's one of the best kickers in the NFL, kind of looking at the entire picture. So it was obvious that this deal was going to happen. I thought it was going to happen before Chase, not only because it was going to be a more manageable deal, considering it's only $16.5 million over 3 years, but also because he is entering the last year of his contract. McPherson is. He doesn't have the fifth-year option like Jamar Chase does as a first-round pick. There was no way the Bengals were going to let him enter free agency, and it just makes more sense to just get it done now because, again, it's a very manageable deal. You see 3 years, $16-17 million deals happen all the time in the Bengals and just teams in general in free agency. And I think the reason this deal came together a little bit under where the official top of the market was set by Harrison Butker, who was signed for like $25 million over 4 years. This is only $26 million over 4 years. This is $16.5 over 3 years. It's because, according to Mike Garafolo, who broke the news, the $10 million up front in new money that McPherson's getting is the largest amount of year one new money that any kicker has ever gotten for a 3-year extension. And this is just classic Bengals. Instead of guaranteeing salaries in future years, hey, here's a ton of money up front. It's how Orlando Brown got signed by the Bengals for like $32 million in the first year of a $64 million contract. Year one signing bonus, roster bonus, however you want to look at it. That was their strategy with McPherson. That's why they're only paying him, I think, the 5th highest average annual value in terms of new money for kickers. And it makes a lot of sense considering, how good he is. I think you're muted, man.
Oh, the upfront money in the first year is definitely something that is worth noting. And you mentioned you mentioned one name, Butker. I mean, really, in this day and age in the NFL, there's probably a handful of kickers, 4, 5, 6 of them, that you're saying these are the top guys. Unfortunately, one of them is over in Baltimore, but these are the top guys, and McPherson is definitely in that group. And it's not, the absolute clutch and perfection in the postseason, as you mentioned, is one thing. The big kicks just from long distances for years pre-McPherson. For years, the Bengals struggled to get a kicker who could routinely make 50-yard field goals or anything above that. And he's out there 56, 59. I mean, it's routinely out there, attempting and making a lot of these big kicks, a lot of which are in clutch situations. And I mean, you can make the argument that in that Super Bowl run, he was kind of the team MVP through that time, because they weren't scoring a ton of points in a couple of those games there. And he came through and just kept knocking last-second field goals, big field goals, that sort of thing, to keep advancing them. So kudos to him. Kudos to the Bengals to continue to lock in their key players long-term. I know there are a couple of others that have slipped through the cracks over the last couple of seasons, or they're working on others. I see Dave Hammond here. When can we look for a Chase contract? Again, I mean, I don't want to make Evan McPherson's thing about Jamar Chase, but I think this one was easier, as you mentioned, just easier to absorb financially. But I think also just it's a little bit more pressing, like you said, because there is still another full year here that the Bengals can continue to work next offseason if they have to with Jamar Chase's deal. I understand a lot of people are irritated by that, but the Bengals have operated this way with a lot of players. It's usually the summer prior with their star players and the players they like to re-sign, their core guys. This dates back to the Marvin Lewis days. It's a lot of times it is the year that the summer prior to their contract expiring wherein a deal really gets done. So could something happen with Chase sooner than that? Sure. But at this point right now, it would seem that we're maybe looking at next offseason for something to happen for Chase and the Bengals long term.
Not only was it more pressing, I think the entirety of the kicker market was more finalized for this deal to happen. And it started earlier in the offseason when, here's a name, Jake Elliott got signed for $6 million per year. The Bengals now have drafted 2 of the top 5 highest paid kickers in the league. So don't say that Darren Simmons and his boys can't scout. Keeping the right kicker at training camp, maybe that's another story. But Yeah, Jake Elliott, I believe, is tied with Justin Tucker for the second highest paid kicker, now behind Harrison Butker at 6.4. But Dustin Hopkins got like 5.3 a year from the Cleveland Browns. Butker got paid 6.4 earlier this month, which I think all of that kind of set the stage for where McPherson was going to kind of fall in this market. Whereas with Jamar Chase, like CD Lamb is about to get paid, I believe. Brandon Ayuk is still trying to see what he can get. After Justin Jefferson, eviscerated the receiver market with $35 million a year, I think obviously the thought process is Jamar Chase is going to try to exceed that or at least match it, considering he's on that level. But I think both the Bengals and maybe Chase's representation, they're still kind of trying to see how everything all kind of shakes out. So there's no misinterpretation. There's complete clarity as to where this deal is going to land. And if you're talking about a timeline, if it's not next year, which again is pretty standard in terms of their timeline, you're talking about late August, early September. That's when Geno Atkins, AJ Green, Joe Burrow, like the biggest deals, the biggest extensions, I should say, in franchise history have all happened within the final week and a half, 2 weeks leading up to the season. Obviously, you'd like to get it done earlier than that, but typically when it's more money involving keeping a player, the closer to the regular season, the more you can expect it.
You mentioned a small handful of names of kickers, and you mentioned Butker, you mentioned Tucker, you mentioned Dustin Hopkins, and you mentioned Jake Elliott along with Evan McPherson. And what do those 5 teams have in common? They win, and their kickers are all pretty damn good. And so there's a correlation there as to why they win and who helps them win, and it is their talented kickers in a lot of ways. So they've paid them. So kudos to Evan McPherson. Kudos to the Bengals for inking an important player long term. And I think more things to come, as you mentioned. August, into late August is kind of when things happen. And as I said, that could be next summer by the time that some of this stuff happens, just because they have some time. And the Bengals, it might even do Chase a little bit of a favor to wait and see as things can be, because then he can kind of leapfrog some guys there. But the Bengals have always kind of, as much as we're applauding them, and rightfully so, for these deals and different things that they're doing, they have played, a little bit of the waiting game in terms of, well, who's, you just set the market up. That team just kind of set the market. Let's kind of still see how we're going, and then we'll make our move here with some of these players, especially the high price contracts.
Yeah, and in regards to Chase and the whole situation, there's it's not going to be perfect. Obviously, the ramification is that he's not practicing. I know we had a comment asking, like, is he going to play if he's not practicing? Yeah, he's going to play because, one, that's how he earns the money. And two, he needs to accrue another season in order to eventually hit free agency. It would do him no good to sit this year out and lose that accrued year. And then the Bengals even have more roster control over him. Right now, he's preserving his body. He doesn't need to practice out there. He's going to return to practice right before the regular season, and then he's going to play. And then we're going to see what happens. But I don't necessarily blame him, considering this is the part of training camp in the preseason where those injuries do pop up. And sometimes you are T. Higgins and you're practicing and your mind is cleared and you're having your best training camp. But sometimes things happen out of your control. And when you're set to make $35 million a year, you want to make sure that actually ends up happening. You're in the right physical shape to actually earn that money.
So we are going to move on to now some of the somber news of the week, and specifically what happened on Thursday with the Bengals I don't really understand the decision of having them play out in the the elements that they did, but it is what it is. They're doing a joint practice with the Bears, and it not only were the performances up and down. I think Burrow threw some touchdowns, also threw some interceptions, and then you had guys going down. And unfortunately, you had 2 guys carted off, Chris Evans and Deontay Smith. You had Trent Brown leaving with a back issue, I think. And earlier in the week, you had Amarius Mims. He's got a strained pectoral that's going to keep him out for a few weeks. So all of a sudden, you've got this slew of issues. And oh, by the way, Jeffrey Gunter retires, who had a half sack in the preseason opener. All of a sudden, you've got a lot of attrition at a few spots, but a lot of it still in the trenches: defensive line, offensive tackle.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. because the Bengals traveled up to Chicago or wherever the Bears practice outside of the city, and the Bears, expect there to be rainfall throughout the day. So with that in mind, they closed the practice off to the fans, and I guess with that, I suppose it's standard for them to have like basically a lockdown procedure where no information gets out during practice. You're not allowed to take videos or photos or everything. So that was like why there was like an onslaught of information coming from beat reporters after the conclusion of practice. But their suspicions were correct. It rained the entire afternoon. They do have an indoor facility, but it's like the Bengals in the sense of there's just one field. And when you have 170 something players throughout the entire practice, it is hard to fit all those guys just under one roof in one field. That's why they were outside with multiple fields and trying to get the whole practice done in about 2 hours. But the downside of that is, like you said, they're practicing in just steady rainfall. And that is what can lead to guys slipping and falling and potentially suffering injuries. So it is crazy, though, that Chris Evans and Deontay Smith suffered reportedly the exact same injury within maybe minutes of each other. There's a torn patellar tendon, which is basically your knee, and that is a season-ending injury. Both those guys haven't been officially placed on injured reserve yet, but if that is their injuries, and Deontay Smith's getting that confirmed as we speak, then yeah, they're going to be out for the year, which sucks considering not only were they on the roster bubble, potentially trying to make the team, this is the last year of their contract. So they can stay on the team on IR and still get paid, but their contract expires. Their future is very much up in the air, and whatever impact that they could have made as players in their contract years is now going to be lost. So that's now, Anthony, that's 3 players from the 2021 draft class whose potential Bengals career has been ended by injuries before their final year started. The other one being Cam Sample, who got injured in training camp a couple of weeks ago. So yes, they definitely lost more than they gained in that wet practice. The only positive, I suppose, would be practicing playing in the rain, because the Bengals clearly are not good at that. Joe Burrow and the offense did not have a good day. And Charlie Jones, who suffered a knee contusion last week, he was back practicing as well. So good news for him.
Yeah, there's a little bit more clarity as days went on, but it was a little touch and go with Jones's injury. So good to see him back there, and that no other, there wasn't just other notable injuries, but it really stinks for Smith and Evans. It's because a lot of it, and I don't want to put the cart before the horse and say, they're never coming back to the Bengals, but you would get a sense of that a little bit based on what I'm referring to, which is untapped potential, right? Smith was just a guy that seemed to be just an intriguing guy, a lot of tools, and just never found a place, or, never really got a foothold on even really truly competing for a starting job. And part of that was because of injuries. And then Evans is the truest enigma of them all. We always joke about his, touchdowns per touch as a Bengal, but, never got in the lineup. And there was somebody, I can't remember who it was specifically, saying that Evans is a locker room favorite. And so, it's just unfortunate. Injuries are always unfortunate. They unfortunately always occur during this time, whether it's joint practices, just training camp practices, or in the preseason games. And you hate to lose guys in, meaningless outings. But at any rate, just the untapped potential of both of those thus far, and a lot of it having to do with injury, is really, really a shame.
And at least in regards to Evans, again, like, it was going to be a little bit tough, I think, to fit 4 running backs on this team, even though that's traditionally what they've kept in years past. But considering what other positions need that depth, I think you were already looking at 3 running backs potentially just making the team. The Smith injury is a little bit more pressing just because of what's going on at offensive tackle now. Yeah. Like, run down the list, man. It's just Orlando Brown. He's your starting left tackle. He's healthy. He's fine. His backup is Jackson Carman, who played horrendously in the preseason opener. And I think this time, or on Sunday, when these tackles were healthy, he was probably on track to being cut. But also at right tackle, you have Amarius Mims, like you said, out for quote unquote several weeks, but we don't know how long several is in Zach Taylor's definition in dictionary. Trent Brown's back tightness, I don't know if that's the same tightness that kept him out of training camp initially. I think it's something that he just has to continuously manage, and that was something that the Bengals should have been prepared for when they signed him in his history of durability concerns. But Deontay Smith out for the year now. you're left with what at right tackle? You're left with Cody Ford, who plays kind of all over
Mhm.
the line and maybe is primarily a guard. You don't want him on the perimeter that much. Jackson Carman, like we said, is still there and he's played both sides. But again, how much do you want to rely on a guy that you probably would prefer to cut? Devin Cochran is left. Eric Miller, the undrafted guy at Louisville. The depth at tackle is very minimal at this point, and you hope that Brown is not out for long, but he wasn't going to play in the preseason game against the Bears anyways. It's probably going to be Cody Ford who starts there at right tackle, which means you're going to have a new starter at right guard with the second team out there. It's just not a great situation. And even if Deontay Smith was on the roster bubble, you'd think that with the other injuries along the position, his chances to make the team were increased. But now, obviously, that's all up in flames.
The depth is concerning, or lack thereof is definitely concerning for sure. And it just has kind of come in a flurry, right? I mean, it's just like, man, all at once at certain positions. Initially, it was the defensive line where a lot of guys were out of the lineup in early parts and middle parts of training camp. And then now you've got it happening at the offensive tackle position, which isn't good. And then, I mean, what to make of running back now? I mean, Evans was maybe in the mix for one of those final spots there. And now you've got some undrafted free agents that you need to get more looks at in the preseason. Again, we've talked about scouring the waiver wire at late cuts, final cuts, that sort of thing to see if there's a move. And then who knows? A couple of years ago, the Bengals made a trade late in the preseason for BJ Hill and trading away Billy Price. So maybe if they feel a pressing need to get depth at one of those spots, maybe they go that route, depending on what that may look like. But we will see. We will see. But the Bengals do take on the Bears this Saturday afternoon, and they will be taking on a team, John, that, I mean, they've got a lot of talent. I don't know how much they're going to play some of the new guys, the uber talented guys, but Caleb Williams showed a couple of nice things last week. And so, this is an intriguing Bears team. They don't play them on the regular schedule, obviously, this year, but there is, this is an interesting team. And I think as the Bengals backups go up against a number of players on the Bears sideline, there's going to be some players specifically to watch and see how they perform this weekend.
Yeah, I think the Bears starters are going to play. I think they want to give Caleb Williams a lot of snaps with the guys that he's going to be playing with. That includes your DJ Moores, your Keenan Allens, your Roma Dunze's fellow rookie there, and a pretty decent offensive line. Darnell Wright was a guy that a lot of Bengals fans were familiar with last year in the draft. He was taken really high compared to where the Bengals drafted. But yeah, if we're talking about the Bengals, this is going to be the opposite of what it was last week when the Buccaneers only had their 2s and 3s against the Bengals 1s on offense and defense. And of course, that led to a Bengals touchdown. So it may get rough out there, but the one starter that we know is going to play is either DJ Turner or Dax Hill. We don't know who's the starter for week 1, but both those guys are going to continue getting reps, just like it was last week. Turner saw the field first against the Bucs, didn't look as well. Dax Hill came in, was graded really highly from PFF, and I think the film kind of backed that up. A lot of ball production there, and it seems like this week at practice that he's been taking the majority of the reps with the ones, and maybe that will lead to him taking the field first over Turner. Now, Dax completely outsnapped Turner against Tampa Bay because he just played into the game longer. I don't know if that necessarily flips. Maybe they still want to give Dax a lot of run. Maybe it's going to be more equal since Dax is going to be out there first, but obviously that's the competition to watch right now. That's the main one in terms of guys being healthy enough to actually go out there and compete against one another. Whereas with right tackle and punter, you have injuries at both those spots where it's just going to be guys who aren't going to make the team or guys who aren't going to start necessarily in week 1. So that's definitely the one to watch. And we went on the show last week, Anthony, and we said the defensive tackles group, the interior defensive line cannot afford to do one thing. That's get blown off the ball. He can't look completely incompetent out there. And unfortunately, that's what they look like against Tampa Bay. You're talking about your Zach Carters, some rookie snaps from Chris Jenkins, even though I think he ended up having a decent game. But who's going to step up at defensive tackle, man? It's just a group that's in desperate need of guys who can be solid reserves. And the chances are going to continue to be more important for Zach Carter, who I would say is still in line to be one of those final defensive tackles, but you just got to look like you belong out there. And he's going to go up against a starting Bears defensive or offensive line that's gotten some work together. So, I mean, it's going to be tough for him considering the player that he is, but like at a certain point, a guy like that has to step up and prove that, yeah, I've taken some strides, because if not, your usefulness and your ability to last long here is not great.
Yeah, so Mr. Whisper once again sends us a YouTube super chat about Dax Hill and DJ Turner. You kind of started off with them there. And the question he kind of asked this week about them once again is, did you see anything in game one to make you think the battle is leading one way or the other? I mean, I think in the consensus, I saw a number of people that were breaking down some things on Dax Hill that kind of basically said he looks a lot more comfortable playing on the boundary, at least at this point, than he did playing a safety role, right? So he had 3 passes defended last week. And so, I mean, I guess you would give him the nod there, but this could be either a week to week thing, or, maybe he continues to run away with that. But I mean, it's a very, very important position that the Bengals need to nail down here. They need to figure out what they're going to do. And they seem to have a little bit of an idea with some things last week. I don't know. Dijon Anthony, I guess he broke his nose in that game. I saw that when he was kind of coming off the field there. So, but they seem to have a semblance of plan where he was going to kind of play that slot Trey Flowers-ish, swing role a little bit. And so, it'll be interesting to see how they kind of round robin that thing in the season. But for right now, I mean, I think based on week one, that PFF score, the 3 passes defended, et cetera, I think Dax has the leg up on that competition over Turner.
And it was really cool to see Anthony. He was out there on the first 3rd down, and they took Mike Hilton off the field when they were in like a dime package, and they just lined up all in man coverage. And I feel like that is a good group to match up athletically in obvious passing situations. Again, it was the Bucs' second string, so they had a good opportunity to look good. But it speaks a lot about, I think, where Anthony stands in terms of making the team and where he is on the depth chart. And he's only gotten more reps in practice. And I would imagine if he can play, when all indications say that he can, with his fractured nose, he's going to play a good amount against the Bears. And I think the same kind of goes with Josh Newton, who I would say, like, the Bengals want to get onto the field as much as they can without diminishing the opportunities of those who are ahead of him. Like, he's clearly one of the top 5 cornerbacks. He was always going to make the team as a 5th round pick, but he had arguably one of the best games for any Bengals defender against the Bucs in that preseason opener. So I'm not going to say that he's inserting himself into the competition as a starter, but like that 4th cornerback spot for the guys who don't start, like that is an important spot that eventually does see snaps, and he could compete with that compared to the loser of between Dax Hill and DJ Turner. And if we want to talk about a little bit of offense, how early does Jermaine Burton get on the field? He didn't see the field until the 4th quarter in the first game. I would highly doubt that he's going to see the 4th quarter at all, considering where he should be on the depth chart. But if you're talking about the 2s and the 3s are going to see the field immediately with no starters, I am curious if he goes in over a guy like Kendrick Pryor, over a Shedrick Jackson. Where does he fall now in that standing of receivers? Because I don't think by the time the preseason ends, he's going to be behind the likes of Pryor, Jackson, and Kwame Lassiter, if you will.
Probably not. And when you look at the, we're asking a little bit about what we'll be looking for and players will be looking at. I mean, the Bengals are going to be rolling with Rocky Lombardi, and I mean, their quarterback situation is
Logan Woodside.
A little bit. Yeah. Logan Woodside, who had a good game last week as well. But I mean, their quarterback situation is a little as you're going into preseason game number 2. So, I mean, I would watch that, but this screams to me, at least on offense, John, with those 2 quarterbacks in the lineup and playing, it's going to be a lot, especially with Evans out of the lineup now. It's going to be a lot of focus on, hey, what are we going to see out of running backs, and what are we going to see out of the tight end group? There's a lot of talent in the tight end group, and some talented rookies, etc. So I think, to me, it's going to be again a little vanilla on that, and a little bit play it safe, move the chains type of stuff, if you will. And I think so that's where the running backs and who's going to maybe latch on to that competition in, or make the final roster as one of those back running backs. And then, of course, are the tight ends going to showcase how talented especially these new ones, are they going to showcase how talented that we think they are?
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like, is Hudson going to start? Is he like tight end number 3, or is Eric All and McLaughlin going to play more than him and maybe see the game just as much early throughout the the first quarter and whatnot. I think McLaughlin only got one catch, but it was kind of like a screen off of like a play action, and he got a lot of yards after catch. Eric All, I don't think played that much, but he did play kind of early in the opener, so hopefully he sees more snaps as well. But you're right, like I would imagine pretty heavy on the run game and try to not put too much on these quarterbacks' plates. But Lombardi was a Northern Illinois guy. He transferred there from Michigan State, so he might have some people in the crowd watching him in Chicago. And whenever they do drop back and pass, like I think both guys are not only competing for a practice squad spot, but other teams are going to be watching film to see if they can fill out the remainder of their quarterback depth chart. I like it. This is the situation where guys are trying to make plays and they're trying to put on good tape, and more than just take the check down or whatnot. Like Woodside even did it against the Bucks. He just saw Jermaine Burton against an undrafted free agent and he launched it deep and good things happened. So extending plays, trying to see what's down the field. We might see some hero ball with these guys because they know they're not going to make the 53 as long as Jake Browning can return from his rib injury on time. So we might see some hero ball here and there.
Yeah, maybe. The other spots to look at, I mean, you mentioned their names a little earlier with the tackle injuries. Devin Cochran, Jackson Kirkland, those are two, in the offensive line potentially to look at. And then, he got some time late. It was hard to kind of gauge exactly, how well he did or didn't do because it was against, lower end roster people. But I think we're all still pretty intrigued and encouraged by Matt Lee. And so seeing, maybe him building upon his preseason week 1 and going out there and putting some good things on tape, that would definitely go a long way, I think, for long-term encouragement.
Yeah, there's no reason why Matt Lee should be playing behind Trey Hill at this point. I think he was better than him in the game. He's been practicing with the twos more often in training camp this week. I thought it eventually by the end of the preseason we would get to this point, but if we got to get here a little bit quicker, then that's fine. It's just going to be fascinating to me, considering all the injuries at tackle, if they want to keep like an emphasis there with the initial roster, is there room for both Trey Hill and Matt Lee? Because initially, if they had a fully healthy tackle room, you would think that they could go with 3 and keep Cody Ford as like the emergency guy, and then maybe go be able to have both Hill and Lee kind of make the team. But if it comes down to just one, I mean, Matt Lee's got 4 years on his deal. He's already, in my opinion, a more developed player than Trey Hill. Trey Hill's on the last year of his deal, and he hasn't really proven much as a backup whenever he's had to take the field with the ones. So if we can get to this process a little bit quicker, and if Matt Lee puts together another game, that competition could be over before week 3 of the preseason.
Yeah. I think a lot of people really liked him coming out, thought he was drafted a little bit later than expected. Obviously size and some other things were kind of going against him a little bit there, but there is some upside for him long-term at a position that the Bengals have kind of struggled to groom and develop over the years. So we've talked about a number of different players really again this week. It's guys grinding for roster spots. And I mean, you could name dozens and dozens and dozens of players this week to keep your eye on. But what are some of we talked about this last week. What are some of the goals that the Bengals should be kind of achieving in week 2? Because the preseason now is different from the 4-game type of setup where it would be like starters don't play in the first game, then they play a little bit in the second game, then the third game is the dress rehearsal, and then the fourth game no starters play type of thing. You would kind of sometimes say that the preseason game 2 is kind of that quote unquote dress rehearsal. The Bengals are not using this opportunity as such. So what are we thinking in terms of what the team should be achieving, or what walking away from this thing going, it was, regardless of result, a lot of things were positive?
I don't know, man, because again, like it's not going to be any starters out there outside of 1 or 2 at cornerback. So just put on good tape at this point, minimize penalties, which was an issue with a certain backup last week. Show a little bit more oomph in run defense for your defensive tackles. My man, Injong Meta had a phenomenal game despite, the chaos happening in front of him at defensive tackle. So it is possible for some of these guys to kind of shine on unfavorable circumstances. Talking about your Travis Bells again, Zach Carter, what's his name? One of the new defensive tackles. I believe his last name is Carter as well. Need to eventually learn his name as well. But yeah, just put on better tape than last week. Continue to show growth, and regardless of what the result is, again, the Bears are going to have their best players out there. They're probably going to win by getting up early, but yeah, see what you can do.
This is gonna be a really broad statement, but I'm gonna say just score points. I mean, I looked back at the Bengals last few preseasons. The 2022 preseason, 23 points, lost to the Cardinals 36-23, lose to the Giants 25-22 points scored, and then a win over the Rams 16-7. So, I mean, scraping to get 20 points. Last year's preseason against the Packers, 36-19. Bengals didn't crack the 20-point mark. Tied with the Falcons, 13-13. And then against the Commanders last preseason, a loss there, 21-19. So again, I mean, I understand who you're putting out there, but you do have teams putting up 36 against you, that sort of thing. And so you look at last week, another 14 points scored. I would like to see, and maybe that's a testament or lack thereof to the depth maybe it's also what the coaches are not trying to show during preseason. I mean, they're still winning games. They become winning teams, and those teams have gone far for the most part that I mentioned. But I don't know. I at some point, I know it's preseason or whatever, but you're scoring 14 points, 16 points, 19 points. Like, get some points, get some big plays, get some things going.
Finish some drives, man. I mean, second quarter, the third quarter was just complete constipation out there. And part of that, I think, was Jake Browning not particularly playing at his best. You had miscues along the offensive line, and you had receivers that I don't think could necessarily make a lot of plays and get open in time. So there's a lot of things that kind of factor into that. But yeah, it just takes one big play to kind of open things up and I think make everyone else feel a little bit more comfortable. And that's what we saw towards the end when the best player on the field was Jermaine Burton, and he was just doing Jermaine Burton things against backups. So you'd like to see that a little bit earlier in the game now. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, we're going to hop on out of here and we'll bring you a post-game show tomorrow as well as the Bengals take on the Bears at 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll have to see what comes of that. It sounds like the Bears starters will definitely be playing much more than the Bengals starters, at least on offense. So we'll have to see what happens there. So let's drop the mic and get on out of here for this Friday evening. John Sheeran, what do you got for us on the way out?
Not much. I suppose shout out to Seth Reese, friend of the program, graphic designer, works at PFF, really cool, humble dude. But I feel like he, more than others in the graphic design field, manifested the whole orange pants look with his designs. Really, when the team first announced their new uniforms 3 years ago. So it's always nice to see a lot of those concepts of his get shared by bigger accounts, and his name and his brand continues to grow. He deserves all the success in the world. Love that guy. Shout out to Seth Reese.
Seth Reese is a good dude, and he puts out quality work. I want to, this whole deal kind of reminds me a bit of a few years ago, jersey unveiling, and you are too humble to bring it up, but you had a really cool opportunity when you were still with Cincy Jungle to go to the stadium along with some other content creators and other
including
people.
Seth.
Yeah, that's right. He was there. And you got kind of a personal unveiling of the uniforms and kind of a behind the scenes look with a small group of people. I've never experienced a bigger set of FOMO in my entire life, but that was a cool experience. And I'm sure something like this today, when you see the new uniforms unveiled, kind of make it maybe full circle moment a little bit for you, or just kind of reflect a little bit back on that. That was a cool moment.
I mean, it's the only time I've ever had to sign an NDA. So like they take these things very seriously, only to be beaten out. No, I swear to God, I've never seen an NDA document before in my life. But it's funny how all this effort goes into making these things as cool as possible for the content team and the fans, and then it all kind of gets spoiled by Madden 25's early release. So then you have to put the pants on a clothes hanger in front of a beige wall and make fun of a meme that you got dunked on.
It's like a wish. It's like a wish. It's like a wish photo or a Temu photo or whatever. Yeah. Well, anyway, that's going to do it for us as we head out of here. We'll bring you a post game report tomorrow as well. So join us for that as we break down everything that did and did not happen with the Bengals and the Bears. We appreciate all of the comments, the live listeners. We've got a lot for a Friday evening. Appreciate it. John, you're the man. Have a great weekend, my friend, and we'll be back chatting some more Bengals through the weekend and into next week.
Catch you later.